Every day you wake up with dreams waiting to be lived, yet hesitation steals your momentum before it begins. This audiobook is your turning point, your blueprint to break limits and ignite unstoppable daily action. In how to force yourself to take action daily, you'll discover 10 powerful chapters that rewire discipline, crush excuses, and build relentless consistency. I'm Jessica from Premium Audiobooks, and my mission is to help you unlock your highest potential through practical, life-changing wisdom. Subscribe now for more powerful audiobooks that sharpen your mindset, strengthen your discipline, and push you to take bold, unstoppable action every day. Number 1. Break comfort loops. Build unstoppable daily momentum. There is a quiet pull that tugs at the edge of every day. The lure of comfort, the gentle gravity of the couch, the small, sweet voice that says one more minute, one more scroll, one more postponement. That pull is not harmless. It is a loop, a tiny machine that gradually reshapes identity and erodes possibility. Breaking that loop is not about brute force willpower alone. It is about redesigning the battlefield, training the muscles of intention, and building momentum so persistent that hesitation becomes an exception rather than a habit. The path begins with a simple truth. Action creates clarity, and clarity creates more action. The first step in building unstoppable daily momentum is to interrupt the comfort loop and replace it with a structure that favors movement over stagnation. Every habit lives inside a cycle, a cue, a routine, and a reward. Identify the cues that signal the comfort loop. Cues are often invisible. A certain time of day, a device, a room, a feeling of discomfort or boredom. Once the cue is visible, the routine can be altered. Replace the routine, do not merely resist it. If every evening after dinner the body moves toward the television, make dinner the cue for a 5-minute movement ritual instead. Stand up, breathe deeply, walk outside for 3 minutes, write one sentence in a notebook. The reward must be immediate and tangible. The warmth of fresh air, the satisfaction of having moved, the feeling of having honored a promise to yourself. The brain will adopt the new loop because the sequence still contains cue and reward. Only the routine changed. That is the craft of breaking comfort loops. Create a low-resistance gateway to action. The 2-minute rule is not a gimmick. Commit to work that requires 2 minutes or less. The first 2 minutes are decisive. They are where inertia is overcome. If a task can be started in 2 minutes, start it now. Open the document, set a timer for 2 minutes, make the first sentence. Those first 2 minutes rarely remain 2 minutes. More often, they expand into an hour of focused work. Design the environment so those first 2 minutes are effortless. Keep the tools you need within reach. Have a ready-to-run playlist. Place the notebook on top of the laptop. Small frictions magnify into large resistances. Remove them intentionally. Use implementation intentions with precise language. Mental vague plans fail. Replace "I will exercise more" with "if it is 7:10 a.m., then I will put on running shoes and walk outside for 20 minutes. That if-then sentence is a cognitive lever. It pre-decides behavior before the moment of temptation or hesitation. Pre-commitment devices operate the same way. When a promise is made publicly or financially, escape becomes costly. Arrange small commitments. Tell a friend you will send a voice note at noon when a task is done. Schedule a 3-day accountability check, or place a small non-refundable stake on the line. The cost need not be large. The key is that the option to bail becomes a conscious choice instead of an automatic default. Design rituals that demand immediate movement. Rituals are not ornamental, they are operational. A morning ritual might be as simple as rising, drinking a glass of water, and writing a single line of intention. Make each ritual sensory and exact. Feel the water on the tongue, smell the coffee, close the eyes and name one outcome for the morning. The ritual should be short enough to be non-threatening, and definite enough to begin the day with motion, rather than decision. Habit stacking is useful here. Attach the new ritual to an established habit. After the kettle clicks, write the first sentence. After teeth are brushed, stand for 30 seconds of deep breathing. The mind resists change less when it is asked to add tiny motions to existing patterns. Momentum compounds. Create a morning sequence that guarantees motion within the first 30 minutes of waking. The order matters less than the fact that movement occurs. Motion triggers neurochemical shifts, dopamine for reward, norepinephrine for attention, cortisol for wakefulness in measured doses. Use these biological levers intentionally. Begin with a brief physical action: stretch, walk to the window, wash the face. Then a simple cognitive action: read one paragraph of a book, list 3 priorities, write 1 sentence. The body primes the mind, and the mind rewards the body with further motion. Momentum does not require heroic starts. It requires consistent, directional starts. Track progress publicly or privately with simple visual markers. The Seinfeld calendar method is not mythology. Draw a chain of X's, and do not break the chain. The visual chain is a form of immediate feedback and a small reward for continuity. Use a physical calendar or a digital habit tracker, but keep the interface gratifying: 1 satisfying X, 1 glowing dot, 1 short message to yourself at the end of the day. The brain loves closure. Complete the small loop. Over time, the chain becomes identity. I am the person who fills my calendar. Identity is the ultimate driver. Actions are repeated because they align with who you believe you are. Use friction both to deter and to encourage. Add friction to things that tempt procrastination. Remove friction from things that signal growth. If social media eats concentration, move the app off the phone home screen. Log out after each session or use a time block app that locks usage. If mornings are the crucible of discipline, place running shoes by the bed so that action starts while the mind is still hazy. If writing requires a fresh interface, place a physical notebook by the kettle. The environment is a silent coach. Shape it. Practice negative visualization to reframe comfort as risk. Imagine the steady accumulation of small comforts leading to regret. Contemplate the future in precise terms. 1 year from now, what will happen if the current small comforts compound into inertia? Stoic training calls this premeditatio malorum, the pre-visualization of loss to strengthen present courage. Use that image as a motivator to act now. The discomfort of imagining loss is less costly than the slow ache of a life lived below potential. Channel that energy into small, immediate motions today. Create micro-commitments that are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable is a word that changes behavior. Make 3 micro-commitments each day that cannot be skipped. Write 200 words. Walk 15 minutes. Respond to 3 important emails before lunch. These are not monumental. They are precise and sacred. When the day threatens to slide into comfort, the non-negotiables anchor action. If emotions argue against effort, the prior decision stands. I am the kind of person who honors non-negotiable. Honor that sentence repeatedly, and it becomes true. When energy dips, practice tactical substitutions instead of moralizing failure. There will be days when the loop reasserts itself. Do not allow a one-day relapse to become identity. Have recovery rituals: a 5-minute breathing exercise, a cold splash of water, a brief walk. Use those actions to interrupt shame and restart motion. Momentum is forgiving when recovery is quick. The discipline is not in never falling, but in the speed of rising. Be intentional with rewards. Immediate gratification is seductive. Design rewards that reinforce rather than sabotage momentum. After completing a focused work block, allow a small pleasure that supports long-term goals. A short call with a loved one, a tasteful cup of tea, 10 minutes of reading. Reserve large indulgences as cumulative rewards for sustained streaks. This calibration prevents impulsive sabotage. The mechanics are simple: action, small reward, repeat. Use language as a tool. Replace "I will try" with "I will do." Try is a placeholder for permission to fail. Replace "I do not feel like it" with a practical script. I will begin with 2 minutes of work, then reassess. The voice inside is persuasive. Train it like a muscle. Scripted self-talk reduces deliberation and channels energy into motion. Speak to yourself as someone already moving, not as someone deciding whether to move. Finally, build for long arcs while celebrating small victories. Momentum is a habit of living, not a sprint. Mark the 30, 90, and 365-day milestones and review what changed. Adjust rituals that do not serve. Refine cues and double down on what produces forward motion. Keep a no excuses log and a small wins log. Read both weekly. The former trains humility, The latter trains gratitude. Breaking comfort loops and building unstoppable momentum is not a call to live in perpetual unrest. It is a call to choose purpose over passive drift. The discipline is a craft. Diagnose your cues, redesign routines, secure immediate rewards, and protect the early minutes of every day. Action seeds clarity, and clarity feeds action. Begin with 2 minutes, keep a chain, make non-negotiables, design the environment, and use pre-commitment to lock behavior into place. The daily grinding consistency is the quiet hero of transformation. Over time, the small repeated choices become the life one first imagined. The gravity of comfort will not vanish, but it will be outmatched by the steady pull of momentum built one deliberate, uncompromising action at a time. Number 2. Crush procrastination using emotional pain triggers. There is a sharp, clarifying edge to pain that motivation often lacks. When used deliberately and ethically, emotional discomfort can be the engine that changes behavior faster than 1,000 pep talks. Procrastination is not simply laziness. It is a strategy the mind uses to avoid an immediate unpleasantness in favor of a short-lived relief. The remedy is not to annihilate all discomfort, that is impossible, but to redirect it so the pain points toward progress instead of withdrawal. Transform avoidance into leverage by designing emotional consequences that are immediate, unmistakable, and personally meaningful. Begin by naming the internal story that justifies delay. Notice the voice that offers excuses, the "I'll do it later" tone, the minimizer that reduces the task's importance, the fear that masks itself as prudence. Write that voice down verbatim. Seeing the language outside your head removes some of its power. When the excuse becomes a physical sentence on a page, the brain recognizes it as a pattern and you can interrupt it. After naming the story, impose a small, concrete cost for believing it. The cost should sting emotionally, not cruelly but clearly enough to make the mind pause before leaping into avoidance. Create pre-arranged social consequences. Humans are wired to avoid social pain. Use that wiring. Make a public promise about a deliverable with a specific date and a named witness. Send a message to a respected peer saying, "If this is not done by Friday noon, I will read my failure aloud on a shared call." The embarrassment of public admission is not humiliation for its own sake. It is a lever to change behavior. Choose witnesses who will respond with honesty rather than enabling praise. Social stakes turn procrastination from a private nuisance into a visible cost that the mind will work harder to avoid. Pair monetary loss with accountability. Money is a universal motivator because it is tangible and measurable. Set up a commitment contract where missed deadlines trigger a donation to an organization you oppose, or transfer funds to a friend who will only return them if the task is completed. Make the penalty immediate and non-refundable. The emotional jolt of seeing value transfer away is more persuasive than vague promises. Keep the amount meaningful enough to matter but not ruinous. The goal is behavior change rather than punishment. Use the power of future regret as a daily instrument. Imagine a vivid scene 6 months from now in which the undone task has grown into a visible deficit. A stalled project, an opportunity gone to someone else, a door that closed because of hesitation. Write a short, specific paragraph from the vantage of that future you, describing the consequences in concrete sensory terms. The sight of an empty inbox, the feeling of a missed handshake, the sound of someone else thanking another person for a promotion you didn't pursue. Read this regret paragraph at the moment of hesitation. The mild pain of imagined loss can be more motivating than the weak pleasure of present comfort. Construct immediate sensory signals that associate procrastination with small, unpleasant rituals. For example, when a task is postponed beyond its deadline, perform a 10-second noisy ritual such as clapping hands loudly and stating, "I failed my plan." The shock of the sound and the spoken sentence creates an aversive anchor in the body. The next time the thought of delaying appears, the memory of that short, uncomfortable ritual increases friction. This technique is not about shaming. It is about introducing a physical marker that interrupts automatic avoidance patterns. Design if-then penalty rules that are precise. Vagueness buries consequences. A good rule reads like a contract. If the manuscript is not submitted by 5 p.m. Thursday, then I will post an apology and 5 mistakes from my draft publicly. The specificity removes ambiguity and traps procrastination in an immediate accountability structure. Attach penalties to actions, not to vague feelings. The mind respects specificity. It finds ways around vague obligations, but respects clearly defined conditions. Employ sensory reminders tied to emotional loss. Place a small, visible cue in your workspace that represents what will be lost by delaying: a photograph of the person you want to provide for, a printed image of a goal missed, or a physical object that symbolizes opportunity. When the temptation to defer arrives, the cue pulls attention back to consequences that matter. Make the cue visceral: rough texture, a weight you can feel in your hand, a smell that triggers memory. Sensory anchors make abstract consequences concrete and immediate. Turn certain forms of procrastination into visible work for others. If a task is postponed, create a small public artifact showing the delay. For instance, maintain a transparent calendar where unfinished items are highlighted in red and visible to collaborators. The discomfort of seeing a growing cluster of red squares will prod corrective action quicker than private guilt. Visibility converts internal friction into communal pressure without requiring harsh judgment. Use sound as a timed punishment or reminder. Record a brief audio message you would find uncomfortable to hear, a self-critique that you cannot stand, and schedule it to play if a deadline passes. The temporary irritation of the voice will produce a stronger corrective effect than vague promises. Choose an audio that stings emotionally but does not cause lasting harm. The goal is to create a short-term aversive cue that interrupts avoidance and reorients behavior. Leverage the immediate power of temporary deprivation. When a task is delayed beyond an agreed time, remove a small pleasure for the rest of the day. No social media, no sweet treats, no enjoyable music. Make the deprivation enforceable and visible. Write it down and have a friend confirm. Short, immediate losses are more effective than distant punishments, because the brain weighs the present more heavily than the future. Use that bias to align short-term incentives with long-term goals. Practice compassionate escalation. Start with low-cost consequences, and raise them if procrastination persists. Begin with a minor penance, donating a small amount to a neutral cause, and escalate to a more salient penalty, such as a public confession or a larger donation to an opposing organization. The escalation path allows behavior change to be graduated and measured while maintaining proportionality. Compassion remains essential. The aim is correction and growth rather than self-punishment. Create ritualized follow-up that converts failure into data. When a deadline is missed, record the circumstances objectively: time of day, emotional state, distractions present, and the exact thought that preceded the delay. Keep the entry factual and free of judgment. Over time, this database reveals patterns that explain why procrastination happens and what interventions work. Use the data to refine penalties and supports. Discipline without data is guesswork. Data turns penalties into precise tools. Anchor pain triggers with powerful narratives about identity. Shame and embarrassment are dangerous when they become the story of the person. Convert the motivational sting into an identity test. I do not let small delays define me. Frame penalties as corrective nudges for a person committed to improvement. When the inner critic rises, speak from the identity of someone who responds swiftly to errors rather than from the identity of someone broken by failure. Plan for recovery rituals that neutralize lingering shame. After a penalty is enacted and the task is completed, perform a short positive ritual: a 5-minute breathing exercise, a handwritten note celebrating the return to work, or a call to a supportive friend. This completes the emotional cycle and prevents punitive consequences from hardening into long-term discouragement. The recovery ritual signals that correction leads to reintegration, not exile. Practice regularly to desensitize the fear of consequences and sensitize the drive for completion. The first few times a penalty is used, the emotional sting will be sharp. That intensity diminishes with repetition, and the brain starts to prefer the smoother path of timely action. Over weeks, the emotional cost of procrastination will rise in your internal economy until avoidance becomes simply more expensive than action. Using emotional pain as a corrective tool demands moral clarity. Do not weaponize consequences against yourself in cruel or self-abusive ways. Choose triggers that are reversible, measurable, and aimed at learning. The intention is to create a reliable system that nudges you away from delay and toward consistent, meaningful work. Procrastination yields to structures that make avoidance costly and completion emotionally safe. Adopt this approach with a clear timetable. Pick one recurring task that consistently lags, design 3 escalating penalties, name a witness, and set the first deadline within 72 hours. Implement immediate sensory reminders and a brief recovery ritual. After each cycle, read the objective notes and adjust. In time, behavior will shift from avoidance to anticipation. The emotional economy will favor completion because delay becomes more emotionally expensive than finishing. Pain used wisely is a teacher that shortens the path from intention to accomplishment. The aim is not to live in constant discomfort, but to create a calibrated discomfort that dissolves the paralysis of procrastination. Replace habitual delay with deliberate consequence, and watch the daily rhythm change. Small, well-placed pricks of honest discomfort will move mountains when worn consistently. Number 3. Design morning rituals that demand instant movement. The first minutes after waking are a doorway to the entire day. They determine whether the mind will drift into passivity or rise into command. Most people surrender that doorway to distraction, reaching for a phone, checking messages, scrolling through the noise of others before hearing their own voice. The cost of that surrender is subtle but immense. It fragments attention before focus is born, and it trains the body to wait for direction instead of creating it. Designing morning rituals that demand instant movement is an act of reclaiming power. It's about teaching the body and mind that momentum begins before thought, and that discipline starts before emotion has the chance to interfere. Action is the anchor of a strong morning ritual. The body must move before the mind negotiates. When the alarm rings, movement should follow without internal debate. The most effective rituals bypass decision-making altogether. Decision is the enemy of momentum at dawn. To achieve this, the ritual must be prepared the night before. Clothes set in place, shoes aligned, tools arranged, water ready, the environment silently instructing the next move. A morning that demands action begins with an evening that eliminates choice. This is not rigidity, it is design. By removing the friction of uncertainty, you transform waking into a seamless trigger for movement. The first few seconds after opening your eyes are sacred. What happens in those seconds determines the mental tone for hours. Train yourself to associate waking with a single, simple command. Stand, stretch, move. No negotiation. This command becomes a cue, a neurological bridge between sleep and wakefulness. When performed daily, it converts lethargy into readiness. The body's motion signals to the brain that the day has begun, and the machinery of attention should awaken. The more immediate the movement, the stronger the conditioning. Over time, the body moves before you even think about it, a biological autopilot for productivity. Temperature is a powerful cue for activation. Splashing cold water on the face, stepping onto a cool floor, or exposing yourself to fresh air shocks the nervous system into alertness. This simple act reboots energy faster than caffeine. The discomfort lasts seconds, but the wakefulness it triggers lingers. It tells your mind that passivity has no place here. Integrating a sensory jolt like this into the ritual solidifies the association between discomfort and awakening, training the body to embrace action rather than flee from it. After motion, direction, movement alone without structure can become chaos. A well-designed ritual transitions from physical activation to mental orientation. This can be achieved with a short grounding practice, standing upright, breathing deeply, focusing on the body's stability, and silently naming the day's intent. The language of this intention must be direct and actionable. Today, I complete. Today, I confront. Today, I build. These words are not affirmations in the shallow sense. They are instructions to the subconscious. The morning ritual is not about feeling inspired. It is about programming alignment between thought and movement. The environment should support this design. A cluttered space slows initiation. A clean, orderly environment silently encourages flow. The mind mirrors the surroundings it awakens in. Keep the path from bed to first action free of obstacles. No piles of clothes, no screens flashing for attention. The ritual should feel frictionless, even graceful. If the first thing your eyes meet is chaos, your inner rhythm will absorb it. If they meet order, the body responds with composure. The design of the environment is not decoration, it is a behavioral blueprint. Sound can serve as a powerful activator. Instead of passive noise, choose auditory signals that align with strength, calm instrumental music, recorded affirmations, natural sounds. The tone should cue focus rather than distraction. Over time, this sound becomes a Pavlovian anchor for productivity. The moment it plays, the body knows what follows. A consistent auditory signature helps the brain associate morning with motion and discipline. Every strong morning ritual includes a deliberate act that connects effort with meaning. This could be writing a single sentence of reflection, expressing gratitude for something specific, or visualizing one small victory for the day ahead. The purpose is to link the mechanical act of waking with the emotional reason for doing so. Without this connection, action becomes hollow. When the mind remembers why the day matters, movement gains momentum. The ritual transforms from routine to mission. Physical exercise, even minimal, amplifies this design. It does not need to be a full workout. 10 push-ups, a 1-minute plank, or a 2-minute stretch is enough. The key is immediacy. The act of commanding the body to exert effort within minutes of waking hardens discipline and dissolves residual lethargy. Each drop of effort sends a message. The day begins on your terms. The sensation of blood moving, lungs expanding, and muscles awakening floods the system with dopamine and endorphins, natural fuels for continued action. That biochemical shift is the true engine of morning momentum. Avoid all screens until your ritual is complete. Digital input hijacks attention and fractures focus before it stabilizes. The brain is most malleable in the first 30 minutes after waking. Fill it with deliberate inputs, not noise. Read a few lines of something wise, listen to silence, or simply stand still and observe the light entering the room. The stillness that precedes motion strengthens the quality of the motion that follows. Technology can wait until your inner rhythm is established. Once the ritual is solid, it will shield you from external chaos for the rest of the day. Hydration should be an inseparable part of this sequence. A glass of water first thing after waking signals renewal to the body. The simple act of drinking slowly, feeling the coolness travel inward, becomes a meditative motion. It cleanses, energizes, and resets. Pair this act with a short affirmation of presence, not grand words but awareness. I am awake. I am capable. Small sentences like this reinforce self-command without pretense. Consistency is the skeleton of all effective rituals. The power of repetition lies not in variety, but in reliability. The same sequence, repeated daily, builds psychological stability. The mind begins to trust the pattern, and resistance fades. The ritual becomes a signal that transitions the self from sleep into purpose. When repeated long enough, it stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like identity. It is not something you do, it becomes who you are. Simplicity sustains the habit. The more complex the ritual, the faster it collapses under the weight of exceptions. Build a design that survives travel, fatigue, and chaos, a ritual that can be performed anywhere. A few physical motions, a breath, a thought. A glass of water is more powerful than one that depends on perfect conditions. Discipline thrives on accessibility, not extravagance. The measure of a good ritual is not how grand it feels, but how reliably it can be performed even when motivation is absent. Each morning is a rehearsal for the kind of life you want to live. If you begin in hesitation, you reinforce hesitation. If you begin in motion, you reinforce momentum. The first minutes are your proof to yourself that you are not governed by feelings, but by design. That proof compounds daily until it becomes your default mode. By training yourself to move instantly upon waking, you build a self-image of someone who acts, not delays. To maintain freshness, occasionally refine the sequence. Adjust one small element, such as changing the order of stretching and reflection, or introducing a new sensory trigger, like a scent or sound. Adaptation prevents the ritual from decaying into mindless repetition while preserving its structure. The goal is to keep it alive without destabilizing its predictability. The ritual should feel familiar yet purposeful, automatic yet meaningful. End the ritual with a clear transition. After motion, reflection, and orientation, mark the moment you enter the day. Stepping outside, opening the work device, or writing the first task of the morning. That mark seals the boundary between preparation and execution. Without this boundary, rituals dissolve into procrastination disguised as routine. Know when to stop preparing and start performing. A morning designed for instant movement is an act of self-respect. It declares that your time, focus, and energy belong to your purpose, not to inertia. The ritual becomes a daily ceremony of commitment, a silent promise renewed before the world wakes. Over days, it reshapes the nervous system. Over months, it reshapes identity. There is no need for speeches or grand declarations, only small, decisive motions performed with intention. The moment you rise and move without hesitation, you affirm the simplest and most profound truth. The day belongs to those who begin. Number 4. Gamify discipline. Reward consistency. Punish hesitation. Discipline often feels heavy because it's framed as sacrifice rather than strategy. The mind instinctively resists anything that feels restrictive, yet it eagerly seeks play, challenge, and reward. Gamifying discipline is the art of transforming routine effort into a system of measurable victories. It changes the emotional texture of self-control by making consistency satisfying and hesitation costly. When life becomes a game with clear rules, visible feedback, and meaningful stakes, the same actions that once felt like chores become engaging paths to mastery. The structure remains serious, but the experience becomes alive. The goal is not to trivialize effort, but to make it sustainable through joy and consequence. Every game has a scoring system, and self-discipline needs one too. The human brain loves to quantify progress. It finds motivation in visible proof of advancement. Create a personal point system where every completed action earns a measurable reward. A point, a mark, a coin, or a token. For example, completing a workout might earn 10 points. Reading for 20 minutes earns 5. Meditating earns 3. Keep a daily total and aim to beat your own score. The mind responds to numbers like a compass responds to north. Even small increments of progress release dopamine, reinforcing the habit through pleasure rather than pressure. Over time, the pursuit of points becomes a pursuit of consistency itself. To amplify engagement, introduce levels or milestones. Just as a game escalates in challenge and reward, your system should evolve as you grow stronger. The first level might focus on basic habits: waking early, completing one creative task, maintaining focus for 30 minutes. When those become natural, level 2 could demand more complexity, finishing multiple priorities, practicing deeper focus, extending endurance. Celebrate level completion with tangible rewards that carry emotional weight, but not indulgence. A new book, a special meal, a day trip. These rewards serve as symbols of achievement, reinforcing that consistency brings real, visible benefit. Each milestone then becomes a checkpoint in your personal evolution. Punishment, when designed intelligently, is not cruelty, it's accountability. In gaming, failure has consequences: loss of progress, depletion of resources, or forced restarts. In life, hesitation should carry similar costs. The purpose is not self-inflicted suffering, but the creation of meaningful feedback. For instance, if you skip a planned habit, impose a small but annoying penalty, donate a small amount of money, perform an additional chore, or remove a privilege for the day. The key is immediacy. Delayed consequences lose their sting. The mind must learn that hesitation carries a cost right now, not later. This immediate feedback loop rewires behavior faster than abstract guilt ever could. Introduce randomness into your reward system to sustain excitement. Predictability breeds boredom. Uncertainty sparks engagement. Create a mystery reward jar with folded notes inside. Some hold simple pleasures like an extra hour of rest, while others hold small challenges such as an unexpected workout or a social favor. When a goal is met, draw a note. The uncertainty activates anticipation and curiosity, both powerful motivators. The process transforms discipline from a monotonous checklist into an interactive experience. This balance between known effort and unknown reward mimics the dopamine pattern that keeps players engaged in games for hours. Track streaks relentlessly. A streak is one of the most powerful psychological triggers for sustained behavior. The human mind detests losing what it has built. Record each successful day of execution with a visible mark. A chain of X's on a wall calendar, a digital tracker, or colored beads in a jar. As the streak grows, it becomes a visual testament to discipline. Breaking it becomes emotionally painful, which strengthens your resistance against hesitation. The more days you accumulate, the more you identify with being consistent. At that point, your ego defends the streak as a reflection of identity. You no longer protect a habit, you protect who you believe you are. Competition can magnify engagement when used constructively. Compete with your past self or with peers pursuing similar goals. Share progress charts, challenge completion times, or accountability scores. A light sense of rivalry awakens the primal urge to improve. Even without others, create micro-competitions. Beat yesterday's word count, finish a workout in less time, meditate 1 minute longer. These small contests introduce a dynamic edge to consistency. When each day becomes a chance to outperform yourself, discipline feels like play rather than punishment. In any game, feedback matters more than effort alone. Without real-time feedback, performance stagnates. Integrate rapid reflection into your daily system. After each day, score your consistency, not your results. Ask, did I play by my own rules? Did I hesitate, delay, or act decisively? Write the score down, even a single digit out of 10. This score becomes your daily report card, providing data you can't ignore. Watching the numbers rise or fall engages your instinct to optimize. Improvement stops being vague, it becomes measurable progress that feels tangible in the moment. Gamified discipline also thrives on narrative. Every compelling game tells a story of struggle, progress, and transformation. Build your own story arc. Cast yourself as the protagonist who begins in disorder and gradually masters structure. Define what victory looks like: a stable career, mastery of a skill, physical excellence, emotional balance. Assign challenges and plot twists, difficult days, unexpected setbacks that make the journey engaging rather than discouraging. This perspective turns obstacles into game mechanics instead of personal failures. When you frame life as a series of missions rather than punishments, the same hardships that once discouraged you now add depth to your storyline. Incorporate visual progress indicators beyond points and streaks. Create charts, dashboards, or simple habit maps where you color-code achievements. Humans process color and shape faster than text. Visual data hits the brain instantly. Watching a grid fill with color triggers satisfaction akin to completing a level in a game. You become invested in seeing it complete. This simple trick turns abstract growth into something visible, trackable, and emotionally rewarding. The more beautiful your progress appears, the more attached you become to maintaining it. To sustain momentum, balance reward and punishment ratios. If everything feels punitive, motivation decays. Aim for a 2-to-1 ratio of reward to punishment. Reward twice as often as you penalize. The brain thrives on encouragement more than fear. For example, if you penalize yourself once for missing a task, immediately reward yourself twice when you hit the next 2 goals. This balance maintains morale while preserving accountability. Over time, your nervous system associates progress with pleasure and hesitation with mild discomfort, which is the precise conditioning required for automatic discipline. Integrate deliberate rest periods into the system. Every good game has checkpoints and recovery phases. Without rest, burnout erodes consistency. Reward long streaks with controlled pauses. Intentional days off where you can recharge without guilt. These planned breaks remind your mind that discipline is sustainable, not eternal exhaustion. Rest then becomes another structured part of the game, not an escape from it. When rest is earned, it fuels motivation instead of destroying it. Technology can assist this transformation. Habit tracking apps, gamified productivity tools, and digital accountability systems already exist to reinforce engagement. Choose one that allows you to visualize points, streaks, and levels. Treat it like your personal leaderboard. Customize it so the data feels personal. Use icons, symbols, or even sound cues that resonate emotionally. When progress is digitized and interactive, it creates immediate feedback loops that mirror the satisfaction of traditional games. Ultimately, gamifying discipline is about replacing dread with design. It's about turning the act of persistence into an adventure of self-mastery. The system you build must make hesitation expensive, completion rewarding, and progress visible. Every morning becomes the start of a new round. Every decision becomes a move on the board. Consistency is no longer a moral duty. It becomes a skill to be optimized, a game to be won, and a daily competition against yesterday's limits. Over weeks, the structure reshapes your internal dialogue. You stop asking whether you feel like acting. You simply play your turn. The scoreboard reminds you that effort equals advancement. Punishments keep you honest, rewards keep you hungry, and the rhythm of repetition becomes second nature. What began as a clever trick evolves into a philosophy of living, progress measured, accountability built in, hesitation minimized. When discipline becomes a game, you don't just maintain habits, you enjoy the process of becoming unstoppable. Number 5. Reprogram mind. Action first, feelings later. The modern mind is conditioned to obey emotion. It waits for inspiration before creating, confidence before acting, motivation before starting. This order of living is inverted. Feelings were never meant to lead. They were meant to follow. The truth is that emotion obeys motion. What you do reshapes how you feel, not the other way around. Reprogramming the mind to act first and feel later means teaching yourself that movement generates energy, that execution births clarity, and that waiting for the right mood is the fastest route to stagnation. Mastery begins when behavior no longer depends on emotion, but on decision. The brain is a pattern recognition machine that prioritizes safety. Every time you delay an action because you don't feel ready, your brain interprets inaction as protection. It then reinforces hesitation by releasing comfort signals. This cycle hardens into identity. I'm not in the mood. I work better under pressure. I need to feel inspired first. Each statement is an illusion built from repetition. To reverse it, the sequence must be rewritten through deliberate exposure to discomfort. Begin to act precisely when you least feel like it. The moment your body moves in defiance of emotional resistance, a new circuit forms, one that connects action with control, not fear. The key is immediacy. The longer the space between thought and action, the stronger the emotional interference. When you decide to do something, the body must respond before the mind begins its debate. Count backward from 5 and move on 1. This micro-ritual, though simple, cuts off hesitation before it builds momentum. Action taken inside that small window bypasses overthinking and teaches the brain that execution can occur independently of emotion. Each repetition weakens the bond between mood and behavior until it breaks completely. Emotion follows physiology. When you move your body, stand tall, breathe deeply, take decisive steps, your brain releases chemicals consistent with confidence and drive. This is why posture, breathing, and pace matter so much in rewiring the mind. If you begin each task with a physical trigger, a deep breath, a clenched fist, a straightened back, you send a direct signal that it's time to engage. Over time, this cue becomes an automatic switch. The state follows the stance. You no longer need to wait for motivation because you've built a shortcut that generates it. The problem with feeling-driven behavior is that feelings are unreliable. They fluctuate with weather, sleep, diet, and circumstance. Building your life around them is like steering a ship by the waves instead of the stars. To reprogram this instinct, you must establish principles that overrule emotion. Principles are pre-decided truths that guide behavior regardless of mood. A principle might sound like, I complete what I start, or my body moves before my mind hesitates. These statements are not affirmations for comfort. They are commands for consistency. Repeat them often, but more importantly, prove them with small actions until they become your default code. Most people misunderstand self-discipline. It is not the suppression of feeling, but the reordering of it. When you decide to act before emotion, you give yourself permission to feel resistance without being ruled by it. You can acknowledge laziness, fear, or uncertainty without surrendering to them. This is emotional mastery, to coexist with feeling, but not be directed by it. It's the difference between noticing the rain and refusing to let it stop you from walking forward. When you move regardless of emotional weather, you develop immunity to hesitation. The process of reprogramming requires repetition under pressure. Choose one area of your life where you tend to wait for the right mood: writing, training, studying, initiating difficult conversations. Commit to a fixed daily action within that area, small enough to be manageable but large enough to challenge resistance. Each day you act, record the time and the state you were in when you began. Over time, you'll notice a pattern. The days you felt least ready often became the most productive. This awareness dismantles the myth that readiness precedes performance. It teaches the deeper truth that readiness is born in the middle of doing, not before it. Cognitive reprogramming also involves language. The way you describe your inner state determines how you behave within it. Replace passive phrases like "I can't focus right now" with active alternatives such as "I can focus for 5 minutes." The brain responds differently to language that implies agency. When you speak as if you are in control, the nervous system aligns with that assumption. Words act as small programming codes for behavior. Speak action into existence, and the feeling of capacity follows. Visualization can accelerate this reconditioning. Imagine the sequence of acting despite resistance. Picture yourself getting up when tired, speaking when nervous, working when uninspired. Visualize the calm that follows. Not exhilaration, but quiet pride. This imagery builds neural familiarity with courage, making real-life execution smoother. The mind rehearses success the same way an athlete visualizes performance before stepping onto the field. You're not pretending, you're preloading the pattern that emotion will later conform to. Reward systems help reinforce this new model. When you act despite resistance, give yourself an immediate signal of completion. Check a box, note a score, or even whisper a short acknowledgement like "done." The human brain loves closure. This small ritual satisfies it. With enough repetition, the brain starts craving that closure, associating it with relief. It begins to seek action as the quickest path to emotional comfort. You have inverted the relationship. Now doing brings ease, while delaying brings discomfort. Be cautious not to chase inspiration. Inspiration is a visitor, not a resident. It cannot be scheduled, but action can. When you show up to the work table or the training ground consistently, inspiration learns where to find you. Many creative minds misunderstand this principle. They assume brilliance appears before motion, but in truth, it appears because of motion. The act of beginning releases the fog around the mind. Once your body engages, the emotional state recalibrates automatically. The blank page becomes less intimidating, the gym less distant, the conversation less terrifying. You earn the feeling through the doing. Reprogramming also requires emotional detachment from perfection. Waiting to feel ready often hides fear of imperfection. The antidote is to shift focus from evaluation to execution. Do not ask if what you're doing is good. Ask only if it's done. Progress requires motion, not approval. Each imperfect attempt strengthens neural circuits of initiative. With time, this practice builds confidence not from flawless results, but from reliable engagement. You begin to trust yourself as someone who moves regardless of mood, someone who acts because that is what you do. Morning is the best laboratory for this training, because the mind is neutral at dawn. How you behave in those first moments teaches your brain the day's hierarchy. Whether emotions rule you or you rule them, stand up immediately upon waking, perform one deliberate act of movement, and declare internally that the sequence has begun. This sets the tone for all subsequent hours. When your first act of the day is voluntary defiance of comfort, every other challenge feels smaller. This conditioning compounds quietly until hesitation no longer feels natural. As the days accumulate, a transformation occurs. You start to notice that feelings become quieter when action begins. Anxiety fades mid-task. Doubt dissolves halfway through the first step. Motivation, which once seemed necessary to start, begins to appear as a byproduct of starting. This is the reward of reprogramming. The reversal of dependency. You no longer chase emotion to fuel behavior. Behavior itself fuels emotion. You have freed yourself from the tyranny of mood. there will be resistance from within. The old circuitry will whisper excuses disguised as logic. You're tired. You'll do better later. It doesn't matter today. Recognize these as echoes of the past pattern, not truths. Treat them as background noise while you act anyway. Each act of defiance weakens their hold until silence replaces them. Eventually, the only voice that remains is command, not complaint. To live by action first, and feelings later, is to claim sovereignty over yourself. It is to understand that the body can lead the mind, and the mind can train emotion to follow. The sequence becomes sacred. Decide, move, feel. Discipline stops being a battle and becomes a habit of trust. Trust that motion will create meaning, that progress will create pride, that the emotional reward will always come after the leap. The formula is simple, but its practice is rare. Those who master it stop waiting for lightning and start generating their own electricity. Number 6. Visualize urgency through future pain contrast. The human mind naturally seeks comfort and avoids pain. It's hardwired to move toward pleasure, even if that pleasure is temporary, and to retreat from discomfort, even if that discomfort could lead to lasting growth. This wiring explains why urgency fades so quickly after a moment of inspiration. You hear a motivational talk, feel an emotional surge, promise yourself you'll change, and then a few days later the spark disappears. The reason is simple. Your brain no longer perceives immediate danger or discomfort in doing nothing. The present feels safe, and safety kills movement. To counter this, you must learn to visualize urgency through contrast, to see vividly what inaction will cost you, not just what action might bring you. Pain, when seen clearly in the future, can ignite movement in the present. The idea of future pain contrast is to place your current comfort beside your future consequences, until the difference becomes unbearable. When you truly see where your patterns lead, the illusion of safety collapses. Imagine two versions of yourself standing side by side. One is the result of your current habits, stagnant, anxious, still making excuses, still promising to begin tomorrow. The other is the version that emerges if you act daily, even when it's inconvenient or tiring. Look at them both. One walks easily but goes nowhere. The other struggles, sweats, and stumbles, yet moves closer to mastery. The contrast between these paths creates an emotional shock strong enough to override hesitation. You begin to sense that doing nothing is not neutral. It is costly. Every missed day compounds into regret. Every postponed task grows into weight. When you truly feel that truth, inaction becomes painful to imagine. Most people run from pain without realizing that it is one of the most powerful motivators for change. The mind responds far more intensely to the threat of loss than to the promise of gain. Psychologists call this loss aversion, but you don't need science to recognize it. You live. The fear of losing something valuable drives deeper commitment than the hope of earning something new. You can use this to your advantage. Instead of picturing the rewards of success, money, status, recognition, visualize the losses of neglect. Picture waking up 5 years from now with the same frustrations, the same habits, the same limitations. Picture looking at yourself in the mirror, realizing that your potential expired not because you couldn't, but because you didn't. That quiet pain will cut deeper than any external criticism. It will awaken urgency like a spark inside dry wood. The practice begins with honesty. You must stop softening the consequences of your choices. Every time you skip a workout, delay a task, or waste an hour scrolling aimlessly, something real is lost. Time, energy, opportunity, confidence. These losses are invisible in the moment, but accumulate relentlessly. To visualize urgency properly, bring these hidden costs into view. Close your eyes and replay a single wasted day. Watch yourself avoiding effort, giving in to distraction, pushing the important aside. Then fast forward through weeks of that pattern. Observe how the body weakens, how the mind dulls, how self-respect erodes. Don't turn away. This exercise isn't to shame, but to clarify. Pain, seen clearly, transforms into fuel. It burns illusions and leaves only truth. If you continue as you are, the life you desire will slip away piece by piece. The contrast works best when paired with sensory detail. Imagine what your future self would feel in that state of stagnation. How the air would feel heavy in the morning. How your chest might tighten with quiet resentment. How your reflection might seem unfamiliar, almost disappointing. Let that image sting. The mind learns best through emotion, not logic. Logic tells you you should act. Emotion makes you act. When you vividly experience the discomfort of inaction, your nervous system starts associating delay with pain rather than relief. That's the turning point. Once the brain believes that waiting hurts more than moving, discipline becomes natural. But contrast alone isn't enough. You must also visualize the alternative. See with equal clarity the version of you who takes daily action. Feel what it's like to wake up knowing you've kept your promises to yourself. Sense the energy of momentum, the quiet strength of consistency. Notice how that person speaks, stands, and thinks differently. The gap between the two futures, one built on hesitation, the other on action, creates psychological urgency. You realize that both versions already exist as possibilities within you. Which one wins depends entirely on what you choose to do now. That awareness is not abstract. It's immediate. The contrast becomes a daily reminder that time is moving regardless of your readiness. To anchor this practice, make it part of your morning reflection. Before beginning your day, take 2 minutes to visualize the trajectory of both choices. Doing the work or avoiding it. See them play out like parallel timelines. Then ask yourself, which path am I walking today? The mind responds strongly to imagery. When it senses danger in remaining idle, it mobilizes resources to protect you. This is the same mechanism that helps people escape life-threatening situations with sudden bursts of strength. You are simply directing that survival energy toward long-term purpose instead of physical threat. The more vividly you can imagine the pain of regret, the more your brain treats inaction as unsafe. The reason most people fail to sustain urgency is because they disconnect their present actions from future consequences. They see skipping one day as harmless. They forget that consistency compounds both ways, progress and decline. Missing one day seems small, but missing one day repeatedly becomes identity. Visualization reconnects that chain. It reminds you that every decision, no matter how minor, is a vote for the person you are becoming. Each time you visualize the cost of surrendering to comfort, you break the illusion that small choices don't matter. They do. They always have. This practice of visual contrast also builds emotional resilience. When you see the pain of your potential unrealized, smaller obstacles lose their power. The frustration of an early morning alarm or a long day's work feels insignificant compared to the anguish of long-term regret. Perspective transforms discomfort into purpose. You stop running from short-term pain because you understand it is the lighter pain, the one that strengthens rather than destroys. This shift is crucial. You are not avoiding pain anymore. You are choosing the kind that leads to growth. To make this transformation sustainable, tie your visualization to a specific cue. It could be the sound of your morning alarm, the first sip of coffee, or the moment you sit down at your workspace. Each time that cue appears, mentally project both paths for 10 seconds, the one of action and the one of delay. This small ritual trains your brain to think forward before reacting. Instead of seeking relief in avoidance, you begin to crave the satisfaction of choosing growth. Over time, this rewiring creates automatic urgency, not forced motivation. Remember that visualization is not fantasy. It is rehearsal. Athletes, soldiers, and leaders use it because the brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined and real experience. When you vividly simulate a scenario, your nervous system activates as if it were happening. You can therefore use imagery to program emotional responses. If you repeatedly imagine yourself feeling regret for wasting potential, your mind will begin to resist that outcome instinctively. If you imagine yourself acting decisively and succeeding, your body will start preparing for that identity. This is not wishful thinking. It is cognitive conditioning. There will still be days when urgency fades. The mind naturally drifts toward ease. When that happens, revisit the exercise in greater detail. Journal the consequences of inaction. Write what it would mean to your family, your health, your spirit. The more personal and specific the imagery, the stronger its impact. Generic pain doesn't move people. Personal pain does. If you can tie your future regret to a face, a name, a memory, it will cut deeper and move you faster. Use that emotional truth as leverage. The discipline of visualizing urgency is not about fear, it is about awareness. It allows you to see time as it is, fleeting, impartial, non-negotiable. It reminds you that comfort always demands a price, that the longer you delay, the more expensive the payment becomes. When you look ahead and witness the cost of inaction with clarity, you begin to act, not out of panic, but out of wisdom. You understand that pain is inevitable, but regret is optional. The body may resist discomfort, but the soul thrives on progress. In the end, urgency is not a feeling you wait for. It is a truth you create through vision. The clearer your view of future pain, the faster you move in the present. Once you internalize this, procrastination loses its disguise as rest. It becomes visible for what it is, a quiet thief of potential. And the moment you see that thief, you chase it out with movement, with intention, with the steady fire of awareness. That is how visualization becomes action, and action becomes transformation. Number 7. Eliminate friction, simplify, automate, pre-decide actions. The path to consistent action isn't about adding more willpower. It's about removing unnecessary resistance. Every decision, every hesitation, every small point of friction drains mental energy that could be spent moving forward. Most people fail not because they lack motivation, but because they live surrounded by friction that quietly slows them down. Messy environments, unclear priorities, digital distractions, or routines that require too much thought before execution. The mind naturally seeks the path of least resistance. And if the route to your goals feels complicated, it will always choose the easier alternative. The solution is to make the desired behavior effortless, and the destructive one inconvenient. When you eliminate friction, you eliminate excuses. Simplification is the foundation of this process. Complexity breeds hesitation. Every unnecessary option creates mental clutter, and clutter leads to paralysis. The goal is to design a life where action is the default, not the struggle. Start by identifying the points in your day where hesitation occurs. It could be the moment you decide what to wear for a workout, what to eat for breakfast, or when to begin your most important task. Each of these tiny choices becomes a speed bump in your focus. The cure is pre-decision. Decide in advance, so your brain doesn't negotiate when it's time to act. Lay out your clothes the night before, plan your meals for the week, set a specific time to begin your deep work. By doing so, you replace uncertainty with structure, and structure frees energy. Automation is the next layer of freedom. Technology, habits, and systems exist to reduce the need for constant decision-making. Think of your routines as invisible assistants. The more tasks you can automate, the more mental bandwidth you preserve for creativity, problem-solving, and growth. Automate bill payments, reminders, and recurring errands. Automate your environment. Use apps to block distractions during focus periods. Prepare grocery lists automatically, or set alarms to remind you of transitions between activities. Automation removes the burden of remembering and allows your mind to engage with what truly matters. Discipline feels lighter when the system does the heavy lifting. But automation is not just digital, it's behavioral. Every consistent action can be programmed into muscle memory through repetition. When you perform a task at the same time and in the same context daily, the brain begins to execute it without emotional resistance. For example, if you write at 7 a.m. in the same corner of your home, the environment itself becomes a trigger for focus. This is called context conditioning. You no longer have to summon motivation. The setting itself signals your body to begin. The fewer steps between you and the behavior, the more likely it becomes. Physical friction is often underestimated, yet it's one of the most powerful barriers to action. The simple act of moving your workout gear to a visible spot, or keeping your journal open on your desk, can dramatically increase consistency. Similarly, hiding the things that tempt you, like your phone during work hours or snacks during a diet, creates environmental accountability. The principle is simple: make good habits easy to start, and bad habits hard to access. The environment will either support your discipline or sabotage it. Design it consciously so that it quietly pushes you toward your goals without requiring constant effort. Mental friction is more subtle but equally damaging. It comes from indecision, lack of clarity, or perfectionism. When you're unsure what matters most, you waste time thinking instead of acting. The cure is prioritization. Choose 3 key actions each day, the ones that move your life or work forward meaningfully, and make them non-negotiable. Write them down and commit to finishing them before engaging in anything else. Once the brain knows exactly what to do, it stops looping in hesitation. Mental clarity is the ultimate lubricant for productivity. Pre-deciding actions also means removing emotional negotiation. The biggest drain on consistency is the internal debate that happens before every commitment. Do I feel like it today? Maybe I'll start later. I should rest first. Every time you allow that conversation, you strengthen indecision and weaken resolve. The solution is to decide once and execute repeatedly. Treat your commitments as contracts, not suggestions. When the time arrives, act automatically, regardless of feeling. By pre-deciding, you move from an emotional to a mechanical process. The behavior becomes identity-based. You act because that's who you are, not because it feels convenient. Simplification also involves saying no more often. Every additional obligation steals energy from the actions that truly matter. A person who is always busy rarely achieves much because their attention is scattered across meaningless details. Reducing friction means clearing space both in schedule and in mind. Remove obligations that don't align with your larger purpose. Eliminate unnecessary meetings. Minimize social media. Delegate tasks that don't require your direct input. You can't move swiftly when burdened by the weight of trivial pursuits. Focus sharpens power. Streamlining communication is another powerful strategy. Every unanswered message, open tab, or half-finished task occupies mental real estate. Create rules for digital interaction, specific times for checking messages, limited social scrolling, automated responses for non-urgent requests. Treat your attention as currency and spend it wisely. The fewer inputs you entertain, the more clarity you preserve. A clean mind acts faster because it's not overloaded with noise. The art of removing friction also includes creating emotional momentum. This means designing triggers that generate quick wins early in the day, starting with a simple success. Making your bed, completing a short workout, finishing a small but meaningful task, creates a psychological rhythm that carries through the day. These victories send signals to the brain that movement feels rewarding. Once momentum is built, it becomes self-sustaining. Inertia only dominates when the start feels heavy. If you can make starting effortless, the rest follows naturally. People often assume success requires constant struggle, but the most disciplined individuals are not the ones fighting hardest. They are the ones who have made acting easy. They understand that structure is freedom. The fewer decisions you must make, the more consistent you become. They simplify meals, standardize routines, automate finances, and schedule their most important work at the same hour daily. To an outsider, it looks rigid, but it's the opposite. It's liberation through design. When your systems carry you forward, you free your mind to create, lead, and think deeply. Every barrier removed adds momentum. Even a few seconds of hesitation can derail action. Consider how often people open their phones intending to check one message and lose 30 minutes scrolling. That's friction disguised as comfort. The more choices you present yourself with, the more resistance you generate. That's why elite performers limit options. They know that focus and simplicity amplify performance. When the path ahead is clean and clear, the mind follows it with certainty. Eliminating friction also means being realistic about human nature. You will not always be at your best. Motivation will fluctuate. Fatigue will appear. Distractions will multiply. Systems exist to protect you from yourself during those weaker moments. When your schedule, environment, and habits are pre-engineered, you don't need to rely on feeling ready. You simply follow the structure you've already built. Consistency stops being emotional and becomes mechanical, predictable, and dependable. That's the essence of sustainable action. As your systems mature, friction diminishes, and action becomes automatic. What once required effort becomes instinct. You begin to move smoothly through your day with fewer interruptions, fewer decisions, fewer setbacks. You no longer waste energy convincing yourself to act. You simply do. The mind becomes quiet, the body responsive, and progress continuous. The small frictions that once derailed you, disorganization, distraction, doubt, fade into irrelevance. To live this way is to live intentionally. Every aspect of your environment, routine, and mindset becomes aligned with purpose. The simplicity of your surroundings reflects the clarity of your direction. You learn that discipline is not about working harder, but about removing what makes action difficult. The power lies not in forcing yourself to do more, but in designing your life so that doing what matters is the easiest choice available. When friction disappears, flow takes its place. Movement becomes natural, progress inevitable, and the person you want to be no longer feels distant. It feels automatic. Number 8. Anchor motivation with daily micro-commitments. Motivation is a fragile resource. It burns brightly in moments of inspiration and then fades when confronted with routine, fatigue, or disappointment. Those who rely on motivation as fuel soon find themselves trapped in cycles of intensity, followed by inactivity. The secret to maintaining consistent action is not to chase motivation, but to anchor it through small, deliberate commitments, repeated daily. Micro-commitments are the quiet architects of transformation. They are not grand gestures or bursts of enthusiasm, but compact promises you make to yourself and keep, no matter what. Each one is a thread of discipline that weaves into an unbreakable fabric of consistency. The problem with big goals is that they often create distance between where you are and where you wish to be. The gap can feel overwhelming, and the brain interprets that distance as danger, triggering avoidance. Micro-commitments bridge that gap by shrinking focus to the smallest controllable unit of progress. Instead of declaring, "I will write a book," you say, "I will write 1 paragraph today." Instead of promising, "I will get in shape," you decide, "I will do 10 push-ups now." These small acts may seem insignificant, but they are profoundly powerful because they bypass resistance. Once you start, momentum takes over, action creates emotion, and emotion sustains action. Every completed micro-commitment sends a signal to the mind that you are capable, dependable, and in motion. This builds a quiet confidence far stronger than temporary motivation. You stop waiting to feel inspired because you begin to trust your own consistency. The brain loves completion. It releases dopamine whenever a task ends, even a small one. This chemical satisfaction turns repetition into reward. You learn to enjoy progress itself rather than only the distant outcome. Over time, your relationship with effort changes. Work stops feeling like punishment and becomes proof of growth. To anchor motivation effectively, the commitments must be specific, measurable, and immediately actionable. Vague promises like "I'll try to be more productive" create no urgency or feedback. Instead, define clear boundaries. "I'll read 5 pages. I'll meditate for 2 minutes. I'll send 1 important email." The key is to lower the entry barrier, so much that saying no feels irrational. Once action begins, expansion follows naturally. Often a 2-minute task evolves into 30 because starting dissolves hesitation. The principle is simple. Make it easy to begin, and your natural drive will do the rest. Micro-commitments also create structure in an otherwise chaotic world. Life constantly pulls your attention toward distraction and noise. A small daily ritual of commitment becomes an anchor point amid the turbulence. Whether you start your day with a brief journal entry, a short walk, or a moment of reflection, that single act becomes a stabilizing force. It reminds you who you are and what matters before the world demands your energy. The consistency of that anchor gives shape to your days and resilience to your spirit. You start to realize that success is not a sudden leap, but a quiet accumulation of small, deliberate acts. The most powerful aspect of micro-commitments is the identity shift they produce. Every time you honor a small promise, you cast a vote for the person you wish to become. If you keep those promises consistently, the identity solidifies. You stop identifying as someone trying to change and start seeing yourself as someone who does what they say. This shift is subtle but profound. Identity sustains behavior longer than motivation ever could. You don't need to push yourself anymore. You act in alignment with who you already believe you are. Anchoring motivation also requires emotional connection. A micro-commitment is not just a task. It's a symbol of self-respect. When you break it, you weaken trust in yourself. When you keep it, Even in difficult moments, you strengthen that bond. Each small success tells your mind, I follow through. And that message accumulates power. You begin to crave consistency because it feels like integrity. The satisfaction of honoring your word becomes more rewarding than any external validation. This is how internal motivation is built, from within, through repetition and proof. The structure of these commitments can evolve with time. In the beginning, choose tasks so small they are impossible to resist. Once they become automatic, expand slightly. This gradual scaling prevents burnout and builds momentum that feels natural rather than forced. The goal is not to overwhelm yourself, but to establish a rhythm of reliability. Even on difficult days, you can still maintain your streak with minimal effort. The continuity itself matters more than the size of each action. Missing one day breaks momentum. Completing something, no matter how small, preserves it. Tracking progress amplifies this effect. When you document your micro-commitments by checking a box, crossing a list, or recording a streak, you create visible proof of your discipline. The brain responds powerfully to visual progress. A calendar filled with marks or a notebook filled with notes transforms abstract effort into tangible achievement. Each mark whispers, you're moving forward, and that reminder strengthens resolve. People often quit not because they fail, but because they forget how far they've come. Progress tracking eliminates that blindness. To anchor motivation long-term, associate your micro-commitments with cues that trigger them automatically. For example, after brushing your teeth, you write one sentence. After pouring your coffee, you review your goals. After finishing lunch, you walk for 5 minutes. Linking new actions to existing habits leverages the power of association. The mind loves patterns. It will eventually execute the new behavior without resistance because it becomes part of an existing rhythm. This is how consistency transforms into instinct. Micro-commitments are also antidotes to perfectionism. When you set the bar too high, you create pressure that breeds procrastination. When you shrink the bar, you create space for motion. You stop fearing imperfection because the focus is no longer on performance but on participation. The person who does something small daily outpaces the one who plans grand gestures and never begins. Progress doesn't require dramatic effort, it requires persistent presence. By showing up repeatedly, you build skill, confidence, and emotional endurance. The process becomes your teacher. Another benefit of daily microcommitments is that they keep you anchored in the present moment. Grand visions often create anxiety because they focus attention too far ahead. Small commitments ground you in the now. They teach you that the future is built from today's actions repeated consistently. The weight of ambition becomes lighter when divided into daily fragments. You realize that greatness isn't an event. It's the accumulation of tiny victories stacked quietly over time. Even in moments of failure, micro-commitments provide recovery. Missing a major goal can feel devastating, but you can always return to a small action. When life becomes chaotic, when motivation fades, or when setbacks occur, a single manageable step keeps you connected to movement. That step could be a journal entry, a 5-minute walk, or one call you've been avoiding. By maintaining momentum in miniature form, you prevent collapse into inertia. Movement, no matter how small, maintains direction. The psychological reward of keeping daily commitments also reinforces emotional stability. When you feel overwhelmed, consistency provides grounding. The act of doing what you said you would do restores a sense of control. Even if everything else feels uncertain, your small rituals remain within your command. This inner stability is what gives disciplined people their calm strength. They have built reliability into their routine. Their confidence is not inflated by emotion. It's built on evidence. Over time, micro-commitments grow roots deep into your subconscious. They become rituals of identity, shaping your mindset without conscious effort. The simple act of keeping promises accumulates into a reputation with yourself, a history of trust that becomes unshakable. Others may see your results as discipline, but you know it's something quieter, a daily conversation between you and your own potential. Each day you ask, will I keep my word? And each time you do, the answer becomes stronger. Anchoring motivation through micro-commitments doesn't eliminate challenges. It makes you resilient against them. It transforms discipline from a struggle into a natural rhythm. You stop waiting for momentum and begin creating it through small wins. And as those wins multiply, they form a momentum that carries you through fatigue, distraction, and doubt. The beauty of this approach lies in its simplicity. No matter how big your vision, it always starts with one small, deliberate act of movement. That act, repeated daily, becomes the foundation of mastery. When you honor that foundation, motivation is no longer fleeting. It becomes anchored, quiet, and unbreakable. Number 9. Use accountability systems to destroy excuses. Excuses are the quiet killers of ambition. They disguise themselves as logic, reason, and self-compassion, whispering subtle justifications for why today isn't the right time to move forward. Every person who has failed to reach their potential has at some point listened to those whispers and believed them. The mind is a master negotiator when it comes to avoiding discomfort. It rationalizes inaction by creating comforting stories that protect you from responsibility. Accountability systems exist to break that illusion. They act as mirrors that reflect truth, exposing every hidden justification and forcing you to confront whether your behavior matches your intentions. When you build accountability into your life, you remove the option of hiding behind excuses. You commit to visibility, and visibility breeds integrity. Accountability works because it turns private promises into public ones. As long as your goals exist only in your head, they remain flexible and optional. You can shift deadlines, lower standards, and rewrite narratives without consequence. But when your commitments are witnessed by others, they gain weight. The human mind is wired to avoid social contradiction. We want to be seen as consistent with our words. This natural tendency, when harnessed deliberately, becomes a force for discipline. When you tell someone you'll deliver a result, you awaken an internal urgency to make sure that statement remains true. It's not fear that drives this. It's the deep human need for congruence between self-image and behavior. The most powerful accountability systems are those that make your actions visible. This can take many forms: a mentor who expects weekly progress, a training partner who shares your goals, a digital tracker that records your habits, or even an online community that celebrates your consistency. The structure itself doesn't matter as much as the principle behind it. Exposure eliminates excuses. You stop being able to lie to yourself because someone or something is keeping score. The moment your performance can be measured, the mind begins to shift from wishful thinking to responsible action. A strong accountability system doesn't just track results, it tracks behavior. The outcome is important, but the process is where discipline is forged. For example, a writer who commits to sending a daily word count to a friend won't delay their work endlessly. A person aiming to get fit, who must check in with a coach every evening, will find fewer reasons to skip training. It's not that these systems remove temptation, they simply raise the cost of surrendering to it. The potential embarrassment, disappointment, or loss of credibility outweighs the temporary comfort of avoidance. You begin to choose action not because it's easy, but because inaction now feels unacceptable. Accountability creates structure around commitment. It transforms discipline from an abstract virtue into a measurable system. Without it, the human mind drifts toward leniency. We judge ourselves by intentions and others by results, which means we constantly excuse our own inconsistency. Accountability forces alignment. When your performance is visible, you can no longer measure yourself by what you meant to do. You're judged by what you actually did. This clarity can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. It removes confusion about why progress hasn't happened. The truth becomes simple. You either acted or you didn't. That simplicity cuts through all the noise of rationalization and reveals the direct relationship between effort and outcome. There is a deeper psychological reason why accountability works so effectively. It introduces friction into avoidance. Excuses thrive in private spaces where no external pressure exists. When you know someone else is paying attention, the friction shifts. You now have to justify not only to yourself but to another person why you failed to act. This small social cost adds just enough resistance to make laziness less appealing. Over time, the pressure of accountability rewires the brain to anticipate consequence before inaction. The result is proactive behavior rather than reactive regret. To implement accountability effectively, it must be specific, measurable, and time-bound. Vague promises, like "I'll do better this week," are weak, because they leave room for interpretation. Instead, commitments should sound like, I will complete my project report by Friday at 5 p.m. and send proof to my mentor. This level of clarity eliminates loopholes. It defines exactly what success looks like and when it must be achieved. The more precise your commitments, the less oxygen excuses have to survive. Ambiguity is where excuses breed. Structure is where they die. Technology offers powerful tools for creating accountability. Habit tracking apps, progress dashboards, and automation systems can all serve as digital witnesses to your behavior. These tools may seem simple, but they provide relentless feedback loops. Seeing your streaks grow or your goals tick closer to completion creates intrinsic motivation. Conversely, seeing a missed checkmark or broken streak triggers emotional discomfort that motivates correction. The feedback becomes a silent coach, always watching, always reminding. This mechanical form of accountability lacks emotion, which is precisely why it works. It doesn't care about your mood or excuses. It only reflects data. However, external accountability should always lead to internal accountability. Relying solely on others to keep you disciplined creates dependence. The ultimate goal is to internalize the standard of integrity so deeply that you no longer need supervision to stay consistent. External systems are the scaffolding. Internal discipline is the structure that remains once the scaffolding is removed. In the beginning, accountability partners and progress tracking keep you honest. But as you experience the pride of consistent action, you start to crave that feeling of integrity. You hold yourself accountable because you've tasted the satisfaction of congruence. That is when accountability transforms from a system into an identity. One of the most effective forms of accountability is mentorship. A mentor doesn't just watch your progress, they challenge your excuses directly. They see patterns you might not recognize, the moments you start rationalizing, the times you lower your standards. Their perspective cuts through the fog of self-justification. A good mentor doesn't punish failure, they demand honesty. That expectation of transparency keeps you sharp. Knowing you will have to explain your choices to someone you respect makes you think twice before wasting time or abandoning effort. Respect is a stronger motivator than fear. You don't want to disappoint someone who believes in your potential. Peer accountability also carries immense power. Surrounding yourself with people who hold themselves to high standards naturally elevates your own behavior. Humans are tribal creatures. We mirror the energy of our environment. When those around you are disciplined, excuses lose their grip. You absorb their values through observation. In contrast, when you spend time among people who normalize procrastination and complacency, your standards decay without you noticing. This is why choosing your circle carefully is an act of self-protection. Environment silently shapes effort. Financial accountability can also be a game changer. Putting money on the line adds tangible consequence to failure. Whether it's investing in coaching, committing to a challenge with a financial penalty for quitting, or donating to a cause you oppose if you fail to deliver, the sting of potential loss activates urgency. Humans are loss-averse. We feel pain from losing more intensely than pleasure from gaining. Using that bias to your advantage can transform motivation into obligation. The thought of wasted money or damaged reputation becomes a deterrent stronger than laziness. True accountability requires brutal honesty. It's not about punishment, but precision. You must be willing to confront your own contradictions without defensiveness. When you miss a target, the question isn't why did I fail, but where did my process break? This mindset removes guilt and replaces it with analysis. Excuses dissolve because the focus shifts from justification to adjustment. Accountability doesn't demand perfection. It demands truth. And truth, consistently faced, becomes the foundation of mastery. The most disciplined individuals in the world aren't superhuman. They've simply built systems that make excuses impossible to sustain. They've surrounded themselves with structure, visibility, and standards that force alignment. They understand that willpower fades, but accountability endures. When you know your actions are seen, measured, and reviewed, you rise to the occasion not out of fear, but out of respect for your own word. Excuses lose their appeal because the cost of dishonesty becomes too high. Building accountability into your life is the act of declaring war on your lesser self, the part of you that seeks comfort, avoidance, and indulgence. Each time you submit your progress, report your results, or review your data, You remind that weaker self that its era of control is ending. The stronger self, the one that values growth and truth, takes the lead. Through accountability, you convert intention into obligation and obligation into action. Over time, excuses lose their voice, replaced by a quiet confidence that comes from proof. You no longer tell yourself you will change, you show it, and once you become that kind of person, no excuse can survive under the light of your consistency. Number 10. Shift identity. Become a relentless executor. Becoming a relentless executor begins with a single realization. Success is not built on what you know, think, or even intend. It is built on what you repeatedly do. Most people spend their lives trapped in the identity of a planner, a dreamer, or a thinker. They believe that gathering knowledge or refining vision will one day lead to action, but that day rarely arrives. The executor lives differently. They understand that motion, not deliberation, changes reality. They measure their worth, not by their potential but by the evidence of what they finish. To shift identity into that of a relentless executor, you must rebuild the way you see yourself, rewire your habits, and realign your sense of pride from thought to completion. The first step in this transformation is recognizing how deeply identity controls behavior. Every action you take either reinforces or contradicts the story you believe about who you are. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you'll act in ways that match inconsistency. If you view yourself as someone who always follows through, hesitation disappears because it contradicts your self-image. The goal is not to force discipline through willpower, but to adopt an identity that naturally demands it. When you begin to identify as an executor, taking action stops feeling like an option. It becomes part of who you are. This shift does not happen overnight. It begins with repetition and reinforcement. Every time you complete a task you promised yourself you would do, you carve a deeper groove of identity. You begin to see proof that you are reliable, focused, and decisive. Over time, this proof replaces the old self-image that was built on inconsistency. The key is to catch yourself in moments of resistance and remind yourself of who you are becoming. Instead of saying, "I need to force myself to do this," you tell yourself, "This is what I do." That subtle change in language moves you from external pressure to internal alignment. The mind follows the story it believes most strongly, so you must give it a new story to live by. The relentless executor doesn't depend on emotion. They act whether they feel like it or not. They understand that feelings are unreliable partners in the pursuit of excellence. The executor views emotion as feedback, not instruction. Fatigue, boredom, or discomfort do not signal retreat. They simply mark the territory of growth. Every moment of resistance becomes an invitation to strengthen identity. When you act in defiance of hesitation, you collect evidence that your discipline is stronger than your mood. This is how resilience becomes automatic. Not through denial of difficulty, but through mastery of response. To become relentless, one must eliminate the separation between intention and action. Most people live in a constant delay between deciding and doing. That gap is where doubt, distraction, and procrastination breed. The executor closes that gap instantly. They learn to act the moment a decision is made. This creates a rhythm of immediacy that prevents overthinking. Action becomes the default response, and reflection happens after execution, not before. This does not mean recklessness. It means refusing to let hesitation suffocate progress. Life rewards movement, not contemplation. Those who act gain experience, while those who hesitate collect regret. The executor also understands that perfection is the enemy of momentum. The relentless do not wait for flawless conditions or ideal timing. They start with what they have, refine as they go, and improve through repetition. Progress happens faster when you accept imperfection as part of growth. The pursuit of perfection before starting is a form of disguised fear. The executor replaces the question, "Is this ready?" with, "Can I improve it after starting?" That mindset keeps momentum alive and kills the illusion that waiting will somehow create clarity. The truth is that clarity comes only from engagement. The more you act, the more you learn, and the more accurate your next move becomes. Relentless execution also requires mastery of focus. The executor knows that scattered effort produces scattered results. They choose one target at a time and pursue it until completion before shifting attention. Modern life encourages fragmentation, constant multitasking, endless input, and perpetual distraction. The executor rejects that chaos. They design their environment to remove temptation, eliminate noise, and create conditions where execution becomes frictionless. They understand that every interruption carries a cost, and every distraction is a subtle theft of potential. By guarding their attention like treasure, they ensure that each action carries maximum impact. Discipline alone is not enough. There must also be direction. The executor acts with purpose. Every task connects to a larger mission, and that mission fuels endurance. When you act without meaning, fatigue arrives quickly. But when your actions align with something bigger than yourself, persistence becomes natural. Purpose transforms work into devotion. The relentless executor doesn't simply move for movement's sake. They move with clarity about what they are building and why it matters. That clarity gives energy when motivation fades. Another defining trait of relentless execution is emotional neutrality. The executor does not ride the highs or collapse during the lows. They move steadily through both success and setback. When things go well, they don't become complacent. When things go wrong, they don't become discouraged. They treat both outcomes as information. This stoic detachment allows them to remain productive, regardless of external fluctuation. They understand that consistency, not emotion, defines excellence. The ability to remain calm and persistent under any condition separates those who finish from those who falter. To sustain this level of execution, one must build rituals that reinforce the identity daily. Small, repeated actions act as anchors for the mind. Each completed habit is a reminder of commitment. The executor does not rely on spontaneous bursts of effort. They build systems that ensure consistency even on uninspired days. These systems act as scaffolding for disciplined, structured environments that make action automatic. Whether it's a set schedule, a daily checklist, or a recurring review, these routines keep the executor grounded. Consistency becomes predictable because the system removes the need for decision. The fewer choices you leave to emotion, the more execution becomes instant. The relentless executor also develops a bias toward completion. Many people start projects but never finish them because the final 10% feels tedious or uncertain. The executor understands that the power of action lies in closure. Finishing creates psychological momentum that fuels the next endeavor. Each completed task sends a signal of competence to the mind, reinforcing confidence. Incomplete work, on the other hand, breeds mental clutter and self-doubt. The executor doesn't allow open loops to linger. They resolve them quickly, turning loose ends into lessons. This habit of finishing transforms them into a finisher by nature. Someone whose word and work are both complete. Failure holds a different meaning for the executor. To most, failure is evidence of inadequacy. To the executor, it's confirmation of effort. They see each setback as data, a map of improvement. This detachment from shame allows them to act more often and recover faster. The relentless executor never loses time to self-pity, because they understand that execution itself is the antidote to despair. When you act, even imperfectly, you restore power. Every attempt, even a failed one, is a declaration that you are in control of your own direction. The executor's confidence does not come from unbroken success, but from the knowledge that nothing can stop them from continuing. Over time, the relentless executor's identity becomes self-perpetuating. Action creates results. Results reinforce belief. Belief drives further action. This cycle creates unstoppable momentum. You no longer need to convince yourself to act. You simply do because doing is who you are. You no longer wait for confidence, action gives it to you. The boundaries between effort and identity blur until they are indistinguishable. The executor's life becomes defined not by intention but by evidence of completion. They embody movement itself. To become this person, you must begin by detaching your identity from past failures. Those moments don't define you. They were simply previous versions of yourself operating without the systems, clarity, and mindset you are building now. The moment you decide to act differently, you begin rewriting identity. Each day becomes an opportunity to prove that the old story no longer applies. You're not trying to be disciplined. You're becoming someone for whom discipline is natural. You're not trying to force productivity. You're becoming someone who thrives on creation. The shift happens the moment you stop trying and start embodying. When you truly internalize the identity of a relentless executor, excuses evaporate. You stop arguing with yourself about what must be done. You stop hesitating when tasks arise. You move with quiet certainty. Not because the work is easy, but because execution has become your nature. Others might admire your discipline or call you driven, but to you it feels ordinary. It's simply how you live. You measure days not by how you felt, but by what you built. You no longer chase motivation because you've become momentum itself. That is the essence of shifting identity. It is not about adopting tricks or forcing habits. It is about becoming someone for whom consistent action is inevitable. Once that identity takes hold, no setback can derail you, no doubt can paralyze you, and no fear can silence you. You become the kind of person who moves forward regardless of circumstance, a relentless executor. Not because you choose to act, but because not acting is no longer who you are.